Thanks for joining us on the Saturday edition of Talking Horses, presented by Saratoga Water. It's ladies' weekend as far as Talking Horses is concerned. I'm Acacia Lamont, pleased to be joined by Sarah L. Bodley. It'll be you and Maggie Wolfendale tomorrow, and a happy Breeders' Cup Day.
Happy Breeders' Cup Day.
Yeah.
Excited to kick off all the action. I know they're getting started about halfway through our card, I would say. It's kind of nice to have those West Coast time differences so we get to go home and actually appreciate the last couple of races. But we have some big stuff going on here today. Double pick six carryover as Game of Silks horses have taken the finale for the past 2 days.
I know. I had a horse that was in my Game of Silk stable, an Easy Roll, yesterday when the nightcap, though that horse was 4-1 compared to the one that was in Greg's stable 2 days ago. That was a $200 winner, which was crazy. But yeah, so there have been some big prices in the sequences the last couple of days, so looking forward to that carryover today. Breeders' Cup Friday yesterday, Future Stars Friday, some really nice performances from those 2-year-olds.
Some big East Coast performances, I would say. I know that a lot of the times you wonder how horses are going to ship and what form they're going to bring, how competitive each coast is, and I think we proved that we can compete.
I think we certainly did. Imagine if those East Coast horses got a chance to run closer to home. Maybe one day we'll get a chance to do just that. But a lot going on today, as Sarah mentioned. We'll take a look, and you can play all of the action with NYRA Bets. Get your $25 free bet just in time for the Breeders' Cup, plus that $200 deposit match bonus. Use promo code CUP25 at nyrabets.com. Check out the site for details. As Sarah said, 2-day pick six carryover, 114,000 plus in the carryover. Kicks off race 5. We'll talk about the sequence on today's show. Of course, a tricky one. Plenty of 2-year-olds and not an easy sequence to get through, but looking forward to it with that big carryover. Middle pick 4. Don't forget about those. We keep reminding you. So if you forget, it's really just your own fault at this point. The middle pick 4, looking forward to that. And as mentioned, plenty of good promos going on for the Breeders' Cup. There's a $40,000 Breeders' Cup hit and split. Be sure to opt in at nyrabets.com if you hit the late pick 5 at Santa Anita today, Saturday. Be sure to opt in. Check out NYRA Bets for all those good promos. There's also a 25% Breeders' Cup deposit bonus. Get up to $100 for the Breeders' Cup. Be sure to opt in at NYRA Bets. So there's a lot going on over there. Don't miss out. And for a lot of these promos, you have to make sure you opt in. So be sure to do that at nyrabets.com. And a $40 bonus. Bet $200 each on Aqueduct and the Breeders' Cup, and you get $40 back, win or lose. That says Friday on there. That was yesterday. Guys, is that still valid for today, Saturday? To be determined. We'll get back to you on that. I'm not sure because that says Friday, but the other promos are definitely in effect for today, Saturday. And America's Day at the Races, we're starting early today because, as Sarah mentioned, with Breeders' Cup, and we have a lot to get to before the time change tomorrow as well, when we lose some daylight. FS2 starting things off at 11:30 a.m. We'll kick off the card with the New York bred maiden special weight sprinting on the main track for the 2-year-olds. And you see the number 3 Salaman Gold right now, 5-2. Sarah, why don't we start there, as this horse showed improved speed last time out?
He did, and he's a horse that on debut, he did really get slammed at the break. So I was glad to see him get out of the gate and be a little bit more forwardly placed, and ran a pretty courageous race last time that we'll take a look at. Ends up finishing second to a horse that did have a little bit of trouble on debut in Solo's Fury. So another one that was rebounding off of a performance where he had a serious excuse and just ended up being second best to a horse that I think you could make that legitimate trip excuse for last time. So I'm willing to take him again. He has a huge pedigree, of course. By Tappet, out of Bar of Gold. He's a half to coinage as well, full to coinage, who's very versatile. So maybe they'll go to turf in the future, but for now, he's run well enough on the dirt. He just makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I feel like we've talked about that Bar of Gold family quite a bit here in New York. Horses out of Bar of Gold, her siblings running as well, and just another strong pedigree for the Broman family. I got a little cute in here. I went with a first-time starter. I do think that the 3 is very much the one to beat, but Malibu Margarita is the first foal at a Frosty Margarita, a horse I always liked. Rudy Rodriguez trained. She did win in her second start, but she ran well on debut too, and she was a good dirt sprinter. multiple stakes winner. And if you follow New York racing, certainly remember this one. But Rudy's Barn has just been in such a good groove lately, especially since we've started this Aqueduct meet. And I think that the board can certainly be a guide, as right now, very early, she's taking quite a bit of attention. But I thought that this gelding, I thought that he could be just a little bit of a fresh face in here. And if he's ready to roll at first asking, could find the right spot.
Yeah, the pedigree's there. It's nice to you have a trainer that's familiar with the family in general, just as you mentioned, and a horse that is certainly live on the tote board. It's early, but always good to see those first-time starters sort of indicate to you in terms of the wagering that somebody thinks that they could do some running.
The number 1 Collected Special, the lone part of the entry that will run Maddie Olver, will move over to this one for the Delgado barn. As this horse was really hustled from the outside post last time, how do you expect it to play out with Collected Special and Slam and Gold both having speed?
Look, we'll see. I mean, I think that at least with Slam and Gold, you know that that's in there, but he's a horse that he had a bad break first time out, so he had to come from a little bit off the pace. So I think that with these types of horses where you're still figuring out what is their true running style, we don't know yet. And we do see a lot of riders, because we have so many going to the Breeders' Cup, we do see a lot of riders that don't get the same types of opportunities. So it's always curious to me to see what kind of rides they give, if they are very aggressive with their mounts or if they are being a little bit more patient. So to answer that in a long-winded way, I don't know. But at the same time, I feel as though with the pace that Slam and Gold did show last time out and was still around at the end, it shouldn't be too much of a problem.
Yeah, we'll see how the pace does materialize there, as the number 2 Sorority Prank also gets back on to the main track. Moving on to the second race, a mile and an eighth on the main track, and this to put it lightly, there's not much to sink your teeth into here. You and I both go to Goldini. I'm going to try to get Rudy Rodriguez to sweep the early double.
There's just not much going on in this race in general, and we're taking a look at a horse that was third last time out, a horse that was forwardly placed, and just running into some horses that are in really good form right now, like Durkin's Call, who he's not a winning type of horse, but he is extremely consistent and one that has gradually stepped up in class as well and keeps running his race in terms of where he finishes, as well as the kinds of numbers that he's putting forth. So I think that this field overall, with those top 2 finishers, he ran the best of many common foes that he'll be facing once again. That was really it for me. There just wasn't a ton to go on, and a horse that may have made some sense in here, Don't Be Late, as an alternative, he's not playing, so I just didn't see a huge case that I could make for somebody else. Outside of Grump's Little Tots, who at least has the excuse that he was off a little bit of a freshening last time and could improve with a race under his belt.
Yeah, and the thing for me, too, with Goldini, has a win at the distance. I think sometimes at this level, you have horses that just really get very leg weary trying to navigate the mile and an eighth, and he has a little bit of tactical speed as well. I thought that could potentially be a key for Dates Freedom, who does have Kendrick Carmouche back aboard, been running against a bit tougher recently and taking a drop in class previously, has kind of been a little bit more forwardly placed, and thought maybe he'll be a bit of a price getting ignored in here, but yeah, it's tough to trust anybody.
Exactly. I think that if we don't see a horse like Goldini show up today, it's pretty wide open after that.
Moving on to race number 3, a mile on the main track, $14,000 claiming race for fillies and mares. And this is another one that does appear a little wide open, because you have to kind of question a horse like Axel Rose, who will rematch with Luna Loca, as we're on to the third race now. Axel Rose hasn't run since August. Can she get back on track after this third place finish, where both of them were beaten by the impressive winner T-Max?
And this is a situation where we're at Saratoga, and Linda Rice was taking an aggressive drop with a couple of horses that were in her barn, and Luna Loca was one of them at this time. While she has now gone to different connections, T-Max, another one, really aggressive drop in class, and they run 1-2. So since Luna Loca has switched barns, I kind of wonder if we're going to get this same type of performance from her. And so that's what led me to Axel Rose, who is the other horse that comes out of this race against some of the horses that were dropping in class, and has had a little bit of time since then. Another one that's just also very lightly raced in comparison to a lot of other horses that we have seen a lot of over time in New York, that they are who they are. And they're fine, but perhaps she's one that could perhaps be that new face to a group like this, and I don't fully trust the horse that she ran against last time for her new connections.
And that's certainly fair, and I had a tough time with this race, I'll be honest. I ended up going with Luna Loca simply because she seems to have a little bit more speed. And I know that was not a quick race. When last time she ran for 14, I know that she was taking that big drop in class, as you mentioned. But she has a lot of back class. I know she's not a winning type, but nobody in this race really is. So my hope is that we're going to see her be forward. She's back in for the 14, which is the level at which they claimed her. I know it was off of Linda Rice, but she's been away from that barn for a couple races now. So we'll see. Those two certainly make a lot of sense in here. You have the two Just a Nyquist in second, who is stretching back out in distance, does have a win at the mile.
Look, I don't particularly like Just a Nyquist or even a horse like Simple Sugar, but they were against the racetrack last time. It was a very good rail day on October 19th, a race that they both come out of, won by crowding out. Just a Nyquist was widest of all and ended up running pretty well against the way that the track was playing that day. So while I'm not a huge fan of her and don't completely trust her, I think that you can make that valid excuse for both of these horses that they weren't on the good part of the racetrack in their last start. So that's why I ended up throwing them into the mix. With a horse that you ended up picking on top, though, isn't she the exciting new face to this group, and couldn't she be in front?
Well, that's where I was getting, because all of those horses we just discussed, they certainly could win in this spot, but I just didn't really want to take any of them. So Angela's Party Girl, her last two dirt races were both sprints, so it's really hard to kind of get a read on her, but her most recent dirt effort, where she really didn't do much running, was just against so much tougher over at Parks, and for the 16,000 on the dirt back at Monmouth a couple of races ago, it seems when she sprints, she kind of gets run off her feet a bit. So she's going to be going a mile on the dirt. Hopefully they're aggressive with her. Jairo Rendon's been riding some good races throughout the last couple of days, being here in New York. And yeah, she's just plain and simple a new face, and not any of the ones that we've just discussed that just have racked up some of the excuses.
Right, I completely get it. You want to take a horse that we just haven't seen and we can't draw a line through yet.
She hasn't disappointed me as of yet, at least at this level. On to the fourth race, 7 furlongs on the main track, first level allowance race for 3-year-olds and upward. And this one, I think it all kind of revolves around what do you do with forced ranking, because this is a horse who's won his last 3. There was a nearly, well, it was an 11-month layoff in between, and then avoided claim, and then he comes back and wins again last time.
And there were certainly reasons to be sort of suspect of him going into a couple of his more recent starts, and we can take a look at his last one here. I think he might end up just being better than this field. I was a little suspicious of him on the race that he returned with for that $25,000 tag, then stepping up. I tried to beat him that day, but he ended up just running a similar number, going the 7 furlongs. He clearly appreciates this distance, and I think that we're just dealing with a horse that maybe Chad Brown thought, okay, he's come off such a long layoff, we want to bring him back in a spot where he could be successful, and then they ended up keeping him, and it's kind of worked out.
Yeah, it has. I mean, he just ran a much faster race last time out than anything he'd run before, and anything that he seems to be facing today. We did see Grooven, who was 3rd in that race, come back to win, with Quinton Bridge, who was 4th in there, finishing behind him. So it's been a productive race so far, and it's funny because I was in the paddock for his first race off the bench, and I thought he just didn't really look 100% fit, was able to get the win, and then I remember Maggie saying last time, still doesn't look fit at all. See, it's just kind of that type of horse. Maybe he's not the easiest to train, perhaps, and he's not the smoothest moving type, but he's been winning and he's been running fast races. He's the one to beat. I've been waiting to try and go back to register. I know.
Me too. I tried to go back to last time.
He did not run at all last time, but he wasn't really against the track.
That was a real stumble.
It was a real significant stumble at the beginning. Totally dropped back. He was on his left lead, just looked like he really needed the race off of the layoff. Plus, as mentioned, the closers really seemed to be struggling that day. So I don't know if he could still run at all. I wish that we had seen just a little bit of life after that, but this will be the day that I think you'll have an opportunity to see him if he still has it, because some of his earlier 3-year-old form was very strong and would match up really well with the likes of Force Ranking.
Right. I liked him quite a bit last time, and I remember talking about this horse with Andy Sterling, and he was talking about his prior form and how he does have that one bias-aided win with that 93 Beyer. But I think that even if you drop that figure maybe 10 points or so, he's still an interesting horse that has that upside to go to. I think that this is not the easiest field for him with Force Ranking being in here, and I respect him. I'm glad that you picked him so that we could talk about him because I think that there's things to like, certainly, and he will be a fair enough price in here, kind of just like he was last time as he did float up. Because the other horse that's going to take money in here is Let It Ride, who is coming back for George Weaver and is a horse that we can take a look at, who was kind of the type of wise guy horse going into his first race. Of course, we all think of the movie. So a great name for him. And he runs second to Scotland, who we saw come back and win the Curlin, and then a decent effort going a mile in his second start. But now we haven't seen him since. And I don't have any big problems with him, but I just don't know how good he is.
I think that's a fair question, and you can see in this maiden effort when he started drifting a little bit too in the stretch. He was starting to drift out. Jose Ortiz, who was aboard that day, corrected him with the right-handed crop. He went back over to the rail, but I don't know if it was a little bit leg weary, a little bit of greenness. He's only run twice, so he hasn't disappointed yet as far as his races on the track will be, but he does have the layup to contend with, and he's now facing some horses that have shown themselves to kind of have that recency and that strong effort. Good to see Eric Cancel, though, his first win back yesterday, and for George Weaver since being sidelined with injury.
And that was a good ride. It's something that we kind of have always really appreciated about Eric Cancel is when he is more aggressive with his horses, and that was an intent aggressive ride with Main Event, and it worked out.
On to the fifth race. This is where we start the pick six. There's a 2-day carryover, as mentioned, 114,000 plus in the carryover coming in. Kicks off in this fifth race, with a nice, easy way to start, Sarah, with the 2-year-old fillies. But sometimes I think that a maiden race to kick off a sequence can actually be a little helpful because you can look at how the board is playing.
Right, and that's a good point because you'll know sort of where bettors are gravitating towards. If there's a horse that had a higher morning line price that is very attractive in terms of the wagering, and so it can be types of situations like that where it's a they knew and maybe you want to throw a horse on your ticket that you weren't considering before.
Well, we have a similar thought process in this race as well, as far as who could potentially step up, and both of us going in some way, shape, and form with the 6th Catherine Thomas. And I think we should start there because she, like I would say 90% of this field, had to scratch and trying to get back into a turf race. So we haven't seen her since July, but it's not for lack of trying. A lot of races taken off the turf, but she faced Hard to Justify, who of course we saw come back to win Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies Turf yesterday.
Right, and a horse that maybe I was a little suspicious of in terms of the setup that she got in that Miss Grillo, where she was able to control a pretty moderate pace and hold on, but I think that she actually had to work for it a little bit more yesterday and proved herself to actually be a little bit more than I thought that she was. So you know that she comes out of a live field.
I've been waiting to see Catherine Thomas come back. She obviously has the pedigree for it, being the foal to Highland Grace, who Barclay Tag trains as well, and didn't break that cleanly first time out, but we'll see if she can be a little bit more professional second time. The 3 Just Jewels, Bill Mott, also having a good day yesterday with Just FYI in the Juvenile Fillies. This one, a $1 million 50,000 yearling by Justify.
He's certainly doing well, right?
2 Breeders' Cup winners yesterday.
Right, there's plenty of dam side pedigree for this one as well, and it's kind of a versatile pedigree. There's a lot of turf and dirt. This one a half to untreated, of course, very good on dirt, as well as being a half sibling to Ballet Dancer, who is very good on turf. So one of the foals did win first time out. There's a little bit of that precocity on the dam side, and I just thought this one, with the purchase price, with how well we've seen the Justifies perform, and then the dam side pedigree as well, they could have a lot of options going forward with this horse, but this is the first time starter that I had the most interest in going into this field. I'm
certainly with you. I thought that horse was very intriguing as well. The 2 Dynamic Pricing is a first time starter for Chad Brown, purchased at the Tattersalls October yearling sale for the equivalent of about $204,000. Night of Thunder filly debuting. Certainly you would think turf meant.
Absolutely. There's just a lot of turf pedigree going on here, and one that I certainly, you know, when David Aragona makes one of these horses a shorter price in a very interesting field like this, there's something going on with this horse in the workouts or in terms of the pedigree, and we know how well Chad Brown does in these types of situations.
Christophe Clement sends out 2 first-time starters as well. We both have the 8 style points. She is by Oscar Performance out of Mystical Star, who was a very good turf runner as well. She too has been waiting to get into a race, and curious to see what she can do. But once again, lots of good turf pedigree, and that's the case with a lot of the horses in here.
Yeah, I mean, there's Public Assembly. There's a horse towards the outside in Channel Loop. I think that these are a very good group of first-time starters, and I just wasn't totally in love, other than Catherine Thomas, with the ones that did have experience.
I agree. Looks like there could be some really exciting firsters in there. That's the way we will kick off today's Pick 6 sequence with that 2-day carryover. We'll take a quick break on Talking Horses, come back and talk about the late Pick 5.
For almost 150 years, the Saratoga name has been synonymous with the finest quality, sustainably sourced spring water available anywhere. Saratoga carries on the rich tradition of its forefathers by crafting each stunning blue glass bottle with the same attention to detail and care that has been its hallmark for generations. Visit SaratogaSpringwater.com today or ask for us by name at your local market or restaurant. Saratoga Spring Water. Make every day exquisite.
Welcome back to Talking Horses, presented by Saratoga Water with Acacia and Sarah, as we're getting ready to talk about the late Pick 5. No carryover today, though we did have a late Pick 5 carryover yesterday, and it was quite a nice return as well. But this one is a fun sequence, and it does kick off with a stake, Sarah, in the Atlantic Beach 2-year-old turf sprint stakes today. Thankfully, we finally get to run them on the turf. A lot of these horses waiting to get in, and you and I go the same way with Apollo 10. We'll take a look at him breaking his maiden over Irish Gent as they'll rematch.
And I think we might just be looking at a situation where Apollo 10 might just be a little bit better than Irish Gent, though he did improve quite a bit in this race. And I think that his performance in here versus his performance first time out really does buy into that theory that the inside was not the place that you wanted to be at Saratoga on September 1st. So nice to see him rebound. And then he was able to take an off the turf maiden special weight event. So nice to know that they have some options going forward with him, but I think he is ultimately going to end up preferring the turf. I just liked Apollo 10 a little bit better.
Yeah, and especially as Irish Gent kind of opened up in that race and Apollo 10 was able to run him down. Apollo 10 was a horse that had always trained so well and tried on the dirt first time. Turns out he actually did find himself in a very salty field facing Fierceness, who came back in a big surprise to win the Breeders' Cup Juvenile yesterday. But there's a lot of turf pedigree with that one as well. So those two horses rematching. Now, we talked about Game of Silk's horses, and I know yours is here in the Atlantic Beach.
I know. I'm keeping up with the trends going on around here. And while it isn't the last race today, my Game of Silk's horse, Ruddy Buddy, is the number 10 in here. And I know that he's a huge long shot, but this is a horse that I think that he does really prefer the turf. And while he will have to improve and get quite a bit faster, I think that he is ultimately going to be a turf sprinter. He outran his odds significantly on debut behind Tok Tok, who we did see in that Breeders' Cup Juvenile turf. He didn't run that well, but going a little bit further, and then he's a horse that was able to break his maiden. He then runs into horses like No Name Metz and Tupi, who we'll see a little bit later on. So I think that he's just been keeping some pretty good company on the turf. And even though he was on the wrong surface for him last time, he did have a pretty serious stumble at the start in that dirt race. So even if he was going to do any running in there, he lost all opportunity behind a horse that I actually think is pretty good in Bookham Dano.
Yes, absolutely. And good luck to your Game of Salt
Thanks.
Stables.
Might pay more than Greg's.
There. Nice that yours is in a stake. We'll see if that one can get the job done at a generous price in there. We'll take a look at Split Strike, the other one for the Clermont Barn, as this horse comes out of the Algonquin up at Woodbine, effectively switched surfaces and broke his maiden on the turf up at Saratoga. And then, Sarah, he looked like he was going to win this race and totally flattened out. Blinkers going on today. We'll see if that'll help him have a little bit more punch.
Right, and I just wonder the kind of company that he's been keeping. He obviously did run well in this race, but I think that we could be dealing with a tougher field. And while he was able to break his maiden 2 starts ago over some horses that we did see come back and do well, that was also versus state-bred company. So I just don't know where he stacks up in terms of class, and certainly could be competitive in a spot like this, but I just wanted to go in a slightly different direction.
I'm a little intrigued by Jimmy the Tooth getting back onto the turf. He's a horse that I think mentally took a little time to come along. He was super green in his first couple of races, but he has some early speed as well, and there could be some other speed in here. We'll see how it plays out, but I thought he was interesting getting back to the turf. And then what do you do with a horse like Dilger, first-time starter?
And this is a move that when I see this happen with certain barns, you have to think they clearly think quite a bit of their horse. But I will say, given the circumstances this year in terms of just wanting to get these horses on the turf and get a run on that surface, we could also be looking at a situation where this is the race that came up and they just want to get him started.
That's my theory too, because we've had so many races taken off the grass, especially turf sprints. And so even if they think maybe he will not necessarily win today, let's get a stakes placing versus probably not have another chance to run on the turf in New York and looking for some softer spots elsewhere, shipping down to Florida, maybe at least try to get some black type in that first start.
And even if he doesn't run well today, to just have some experience for this horse going forwards, and they can see what they're working with moving into the winter instead of wondering this whole time.
Maiden special weight in race 7, a mile on the main track for the 2-year-olds. And this one has some horses with experience. And we'll start with Hunt Ball, who you have on top. This one, the half-brother to Cody's Wish, who will be trying to defend his title in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile later this afternoon. Sarah, I hope that they're a little bit more aggressive with him. He just didn't have so much punch late last time out.
No, and he's a horse that they added those blinkers, they stretched him out in distance, and he didn't run badly. He improved from a 68 to a 76 buyer from his first to his second start, and he could end up being a good one. I like to see that progressive improvement, but at the same time, I do want to see him be a little bit more forward, especially today. I will say that I think the company that he's been keeping has been pretty solid, even though Risk It didn't run back when in his next start. I like Drumroll Please quite a bit, and he's a horse that had faced Locked in the past. I know that race didn't come back super quick in terms of buyer speed figures, but these are 2-year-olds. They always have that room for improvement, and I just think that he's a horse that has been facing some serious company as far as what's around at this time of year.
I'm going to take a little shot with the 4 Ignite the Light. The top 2 finishers in that September 16th race were just dueling way ahead of the rest of the field and ran incredibly quickly. And this one didn't do much running, but he just didn't really look fit first time out. He was very green in the preliminaries. He has a big pedigree, being half to Grade 1 winner by the Moon, by Into Mischief. He's stretching out second out, and I'm curious as to what he will do in his second start.
Yeah, and didn't even run that badly first time out, so I completely get the interest with him. Change of Command is a horse that we see a lot of the times with the Shug McGahee runners. He's a very patient trainer with them, and we'll sort of see them take steps forward as they race. Another one that debuted against Fearlessness, who we saw yesterday, and come back win that juvenile. And then last time out, I liked that he didn't necessarily take a big step forward in terms of numbers, but did run third that day and is now stretching out in distance. Just thought could take another step forward in here.
And then Chad Brown with 2 first-time starters, including the $2.3 million son of gun runner Sierra Leone, as well as Tuscan Gold, who's the sister to Complexity. Race 8, New York bred allowance race, a mile on the main track. I thought that Thrill of It was intriguing in here. It's kind of a, do you like Colloquy? And if not, where else do you go?
Yeah, I think that is the big decision that you are making in a race like this. And we'll take a look at his last win here. This wasn't a day, but in his next start, he was wide. Speed and the rail were good last time out. So he was running against Thrill of It, who did have more of that inside trip. But this was a big performance from him on this day in Saratoga, July 28th. And he's a horse that he ran an 82 Beyer that day. It was going a mile and an eighth and didn't run that badly, perhaps being a little bit against the track last time out, but running a similar figure. So I respect him. He's a horse that can be a little bit more forward perhaps in here, because I don't trust a horse like Maker's Candy, even though he is projected to be in front.
I know, I put him in second, but for me, he's a very tough horse to really have a lot of belief in. He obviously, I think, is kind of elevated on paper by all of the New York Med Stakes that he's been running in, and then you kind of sift through that and say, well, is he really that good? So I think this will kind of be the telltale spot for him today. You go to Mason Mania, though. This one should be a nice price.
Yeah, and I don't know if he's that good, but I know that he has the dirt form as he now switches back to that surface after a couple of tries on synthetic, and he's been in a lot of different barns, but I respect the job that Fernando Abreu does. He's a horse that will be coming from a little bit off the pace, but just some of the company that he kept over the spring and winter earlier this year, horses like Olympic Dreams when he was in very good form, Ouster, just horses that would be quite tough in a spot like this with their better races. So I think that just with him, I respect his consistency. I know that he can handle this surface. He'll be a fair price. And when I have a lot of questions about horses either based on their last race or if they're that good overall, I want a horse that will be a fair price and at least I'll get what I'm going to get from him.
Yeah, that's fair. There's no Olympic Dreams or Ouster in this race, I would say. The second of two stakes is the 9th race. This is the girls in the spotlight here for the Stewart Manor. 6 furlongs on the outer turf for the 2-year-old fillies this time. And this race, to me, Sarah, there's so much speed. What happens as a result? We'll take a look at a couple of horses quickly that you and I don't really use and maybe a little bit further down, but we'll start off with Rosie Jeeks. She was so quick. She was really impressive. She broke her maiden first time out on the turf, but she should have a lot of company today.
She should, and look, she ran fine. I get that she's a horse that you have to at least respect in here. It's a Chad Brown runner just making her second start. She's pretty quick. I like Beats a little bit, who ended up running second behind her. I think that she could really be one that we see a little bit from going forwards, but I agree. I think this is a situation where she's not going to get as easy a time of it on the front end.
We'll take a look at Ever So Sweet as well. She actually broke her maiden on the same day as Rosie Jeeks. It was kind of the split divisions of that race, but Ever So Sweet ran the quicker one, and she also had the experience coming in, but she's got the outside post this time sprinting. I think that she is a very talented horse. I just really worry if the dynamics are not necessarily going to set up for her and how she'll be able to navigate from the outside, because she'll have to hustle.
Right. I have the same thoughts with her. I respect her. I think that she's talented. Now making her third start, she's a horse that can be forward but doesn't necessarily need to be on the lead. And I think that she has that talent moving forwards, but I don't particularly appreciate the outside post for her. And I think that there's just a lot going on in this race outside of those two. And that's what led me to wanting to find a bigger price. And I know that you did as well.
Let's hear it about Love to Eat.
She might not be that good, but I think that she has some dirtied up form. You're looking at a horse that's only run on the turf one time. It was a win at Kentucky Downs, and while it was going 7 furlongs, or maybe perhaps closer to a mile there with how things go at Kentucky Downs, she's a horse that was sitting just a little bit off of a pace that once she was making her move and was going forward, other horses were closing in. The other horses that were forwardly placed backed up out of there. Was that field that good? Probably not. But at the same time, she's a horse that can be forward without needing the lead. And in these sprints, I want a horse like that where I don't know what kind of quality she's bringing to this race, but she has quite a bit of foundation now for Mike Maker, and she's only had the one opportunity on this surface. So I'm willing to swing with this horse, who I think that maybe she could just be a turf sprinter.
I had the similar idea with Tupi, who was actually the favorite in the Jessamine last time out, which I thought was kind of amazing. But she cuts back in distance. She's clearly not a horse that wants to go that far. She was really second best in the Rosies, but that was against a boy behind Nonay Metz, who actually went off the favorite in the juvenile turf sprint yesterday. He ran well, held on for fourth, I believe, of the Weaver trio in there. But I thought that this was a horse who could potentially improve getting back to a sprint and might set the right kind of trip.
Right. I think this is what she wants to do.
One more on the card, race 10, New York bred maiden claiming, going 1 16th on the inner turf. And as is often the case with the New York bred maiden claiming, there is quite a few ways to go. Let's start the conversation with the 5. He's a lucky guy, though, who you ended up picking. And this is a horse who's run second twice, actually had a nightmare trip on debut when impeded behind Indian Mischief, who would come back to win again with an 84 Beyer speed figure. But this is the second place finish when stepping up to face maiden special weight company Colonial.
And it was also versus Open Company as well. So he's a horse that they added the blinkers in this start. He was still maybe perhaps a little bit green, but seemed to be a bit more professional, running about the same number. And now we see him taking that drop in class again, facing State Bred Company again. And just, I think that he has so much more upside than a lot of other horses in this field. And we've seen 2 consistent efforts from him, whereas from other horses in here, we've seen a lot from them and it's not always consistent. So look, he'll be a short price. I just couldn't make a huge case for a major alternative in this spot. I think that today could be the right kind of day for him. And while I don't love seeing a horse go from 20 to 1 to 3 to 1 to now 3 to 1 again, he's just a horse that I feel confident in relying on.
I feel he's kind of the horse to beat in here off of those 2 races and back into the maiden claiming level at which he started. I think he's the one to beat to try to get a little cute and creative in the last race. I took a shot with Tony O, who I know he's had a lot of changes, but at least he's dropping for the first time. He did not run well last time, but he had some really solid races throughout the summer. He'll be second off a little bit of a freshening for Dave Donk, again, dropping in class for the first time. We'll see if he can finally turn things around, but he will have to go out and do it.
He will, but I mean, he's faced good company. Laurel Valley is turning out to be okay for Mike Maker. Bourbon Chase I don't particularly like, but he seems like a consistent horse, and maybe Tonio's not a dirt horse. One headlight. He's put in some good performances. Even if you go all the way back to Clear Conscience, Ortiz, these are not bad horses that he's been facing. So this will be class relief for him.
We'll see if he can find his friends today. That's the 10 race card. Sarah's got to get upstairs and be on the early show for America's Day at the Races. Quick reminder, you can bet all of the action with Naira Bets. Breeders' Cup Saturday coming up today. If you have a $25 free bet using promo code CUP25 plus your $200 sign-up bonus. Check that out at nairabets.com. Download the app today. Pick 6 carryover, 2-day carryover, 114,000 plus kicks off in race number 5 today. Middle pick 4, as always. Don't forget about that. And then, as we mentioned, plenty of good promos going on over at Naira Bets. Opt in for the $40,000 Breeders' Cup Hit and Split. That's for today. So that's the promo that you really want to narrow in on today if you hit the late pick 5 at Santa Anita. What else do we have? That's it. America's Day at the Races starts at 11:30. It'll be Sarah along with Lafitte Pinkai and Richard Migliori on the early show. Tune in on FS2. Have a wonderful day.
You too.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us on Talking Horses. Good luck today and happy Breeders' Cup to everybody. Standing by, Chris Griffin for a reprise of Scratches and Changes.
For almost 150 years, the Saratoga name has been synonymous with the finest quality, sustainably sourced spring water available anywhere. Saratoga carries on the rich tradition of its forefathers by crafting each stunning blue glass bottle with the same attention to detail and care that has been its hallmark for generations. Visit SaratogaSpringwater.com today or ask for us by name at your local market or restaurant. Saratoga Spring Water. Make every day exquisite.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Aqueduct. Track is fast, turf is firm. Getting close to the start of the early pick 5, here are today's scratches and changes. Race 1 is the start of the early pick 5. Scratch the 1A Apollo Cove.